Welcome everyone back to the Real News Network. I'm Jared Ball here in Baltimore. On Thursday, Ugandans will be heading to the polls to vote in the presidential elections. They will be deciding whether to re-elect President Yoweri Museveni, who is seeking his fifth term in office. His main opposition candidate is Kizza Besigye, who is the head of the Forum for Democratic Change, or FDC, party. In 2011, Amnesty International reported of abuses and violent clashes across the region during the election period, causing many to worry about an impending escalation in violence. Already on Monday in Uganda's capital, Kampala, violence erupted when a rally of opposition supporters was met with tear gas. One person was killed and several were injured. Joining us to discuss all of this is our next guest, Reverend Dr. Kapya Kaoma. Kaoma is the senior researcher at Political Research Associates and the author of American Culture Warriors in Africa, a guide to the exporters of homophobia and sexism. Welcome, Reverend Dr. Kaoma, to The Real News.
Thank you for having me.
So opposition leader Kizza Besigye has come out and said that he believes Museveni will rig the vote. He said if there is evidence of fraud, he will launch a, quote, defiance campaign. Let's take a quick look at what he had to say.
If we consider that this election is fraudulent to the extent that we reject the outcome, we shall do so. We shall make that recommendation to them that this is what we found. We don't consider that this election is something that we can respect. Defiance really means that we don't cooperate with the regime. We don't cooperate. We continue to demonstrate against its actions and so on and so forth until delegitimize it. We'll delegitimize it until the regime succumbs to the will of the people.
Dr. Kaoma, can you tell us your thoughts about the electoral process in Uganda and whether there is indeed a lack of an independent electoral body that presides over these elections?
Yeah, the biggest problem in Uganda, like many other African countries, is that the Electoral Commission is not independent from the party in power. In this case, they are Museveni's boys who run these elections. And so the concern of the opposition is real. And for so long, Museveni has played the same game. Every election, people have complained, but nothing happens. And the reason is that the biggest supporter of Museveni, in a way, is the West, especially the US government. If they can stand and with the people on the streets and say, wait a minute, we want this process to be streamlined, I think we can see change. Currently, that is not viable, and Museveni knows that the West will do nothing to challenge that. It happened in 2011. Most of the people thought, and most of the scholars thought, that was the last year for Museveni to survive as a political giant. But still the same thing happened. He rigged the election and still is the president of Uganda, and is still recognized by the international community as such.
So then what value then do you place on the electoral process there, given all the concerns over the process being rigged? Then what point do you see in engaging in this process at all?
The biggest problem in Uganda is that there are different generations of Ugandans. The older generation is afraid of the wars. When Museveni himself was a labor leader, they saw blood so much. When Idi Amin was president, the same thing. So the older generation is somehow afraid of changing the government. The second generation now are those who were born post Museveni's leadership. And this is the biggest challenge Uganda faces, because to them, they don't have the history of war and they want to see that the government is changed. Now, how does Museveni survive out of this? Museveni knows that the young people are very, very disappointed. For instance, based on the World Bank information, about 60% of Ugandans who are supposed to be working, that's the age of the working age, are unemployed in Uganda. The African Development Bank, which is an African organization or bank, says that 83% of the working age is unemployed in Uganda. So the young people want to see change. But they are also surprised that they have been voting over and over again and nothing changes. So that is what gives Museveni power to rig the elections, because the majority of the young people want change, but they are being discouraged. They know that their vote makes no difference. And so they stay home, and the older generation comes in. But maybe that's something to say about this is this. if the rigging of elections in Uganda is not just limited to Museveni. Even Museveni's own party has had elections rigged. So if they can rig within the same party, what do you expect from the opposition?
Now, it seems that there's some contradicting reports here, because if I heard you correctly, the Uganda's Ministry of Finance, the claims of the Ministry of Finance in Uganda that poverty rates have declined seems, and employment has gone up, seems to contradict the numbers you just described facing young people there. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, who is saying that? It's the same system trying to hide the truth. Mind you, this is not just the World Bank. In fact, the World Bank's numbers say 60% of the working age is unemployed in Uganda. The Africa Development Bank, which is linked to the African Union, says is 83%. So what can Uganda say about that? Their own organization, which monitors developments in various African countries, says 83% of the young age is not working at all.
So finally, Reverend Dr. Kaoma, what would you, very quickly, what would you suggest needs to take place in Uganda to see any real progressive progress take place?
Unfortunately, the world only understands and respects the will of the people, in Africa specifically, when there's violence. Before people start dying, they don't pay attention to anything like the election. So we do have, and we're going to have, international monitors going into Uganda. There will be some people from the US in Uganda trying to monitor the elections. But there has never been an election which has been found to be flawed, and then the world has said this was a legitimate election. What happens over and over again is that people vote. People say the election is rigged, but the same guys are the same guys you see the following day. It happened in Zimbabwe. It happens in the Congo. It happened in Burundi, and now even in Rwanda itself. It is happening now in Uganda. So until the blood is shed, the international community does not care. They just legitimize dictatorship. In fact, that's how I call Museveni. He's a dictator. And the US government knows that. The UN knows that. But they are not prepared to stop him. All they do is to look the other side, as though the lives of the young people who are dying in violence do not matter at all.
Well, Reverend Dr. Kaoma, thank you very much for joining us here at The Real News and helping shed some light on these important elections and processes taking place there in Uganda.
Thanks a lot for having me.
And thank you all for joining us here at The Real News. Again, for all involved, I'm Jared Ball here in Baltimore saying, as Fred Hampton used to say, to you we say peace if you're willing to fight for it. So peace, everybody, and we'll catch you in the whirlwind.